help you. Just some housekeeping items. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the icons here below. And if you want to get some feedback to us in a couple different ways, please do so. You can either throw questions in the chat or there's a Q&A function. Mike and I would really like that because that means that we can answer as many questions at the end as possible, but also we can continue to refine the sessions. That's really important to us, that you get the most out of these sessions as you possibly can. And I know that's really important to Charlie and Jill. So help us hold up our end of the bargain and ask some good questions here so that Charlie and Jill can be happy. All right. In terms of the agenda, here's what we want to do over the next hour together. So we're going to talk about what the LCRR requirements are for lead service lines. So I'll tell you what's in there. We'll talk a little bit about the strategies that our clients use when trying to get inventories together. So we'll provide you with some recommendations. And then we're going to talk about, in those recommendations, we're going to outline, here are some things that we think you can do today. And not all of those things are going to be spend money. Some of these things are just going to be some simple, efficient things, some steps that you can do now so that in 2024, you're not having heart palpitations when all these things are due. So that's our goal here. If everyone could mute themselves here, and I've got the power, so I might go. That'd be helpful. I think it's you, Tammy. If you could mute yourself, that'd be great. Then I'm going to pass it over to Mike, and Mike's going to talk about how to communicate when it comes to lead service line inventories and replacements. And while the communications piece, some of those things obviously don't come into effect until 2024, but thinking about how you do an inventory and how you're going to communicate with your customers as you're doing it, those two things are very important planning steps. And so that's why he and I wanted to come to the table today and talk about them simultaneously. So he's going to come in with his expertise there. And then Lowell, he wasn't featured here. Sorry, Lowell, that I didn't give you a bullet point on the agenda. But then Lowell's going to talk about, okay, education aside, what can we do to help you? And how do we talk about getting that conversation started, rather, about how we can help you? So he'll talk about that, and then we'll get into some questions and discussion. All right, so let's do this. So as I promised, we're going to start by talking about what EPA has asked you all to do. So they want you to put together an inventory for the first time. Maybe you had to do one in 1991. It was something called a materials inventory. That's not this. This is a totally different thing, and it's a lot more complicated. Here's what they say. All service lines and all segments need to be recorded, regardless of if you own the line or the customer owns half. It's not just residential lines. Right now, it's being interpreted as also commercial service line or lateral connection. So all lines must be detailed for all systems that have to comply with lead and copper rule. It's location based, so they're not asking you to submit like a count. So don't imagine that you've got like a spreadsheet with 5 categories and you say, well, I got 20 lines of this and 30 lines of that. No, it's by location. In green, bolded and underlined is the fact that it can include unknowns. They understand, EPA understands that you're not going to have a lot of records here. And so you can be honest about what you don't know and then work to whittle that down over time. That's actually a central takeaway for me. That should give you some comfort that there's a way to do this that is sustainable, because you can tell them that you don't know some information. So we're going to be talking about how we deal with that in a little bit. If you find lead service lines, or you have lead service lines in your records, then you do need to create what's called a lead service line replacement plan. We'll talk about what that is. And then if you serve more than 50,000 people, you need to put it online, but everyone has to make it public. And Mike's going to talk a little bit more about what requirements are there for the sharing of this information, and also some recommendations for how you do that. I have some due dates down there. And on the other side as well. So as we talked about last time, the rule got pulled back in for more comment. And so the inventory is due on the compliance date, or by the compliance date. And that date is shifting a bit. So it will either be due in January or it will be due in September. So that should be 9/16 of 2024. Excuse me for the typo. I'll fix that before we send the slides out. But it's due in 2024. That's the takeaway, right? And your regulators are going to be reaching out as that date approaches to give you some more concrete information, but it's going to be due then. So you can either submit that first inventory, and that's something that we recommend you start working on now, what I call the preliminary inventory. And that first thing is going to be due in 2024. You can either submit that or evidence that you don't have any LSLs. And to do that, you would get a waiver, and EPA says, you need to submit that inventory and talk about the methods that you use to generate it. After that, you have to resubmit it every 1 to 3 years, and you do that based on your monitoring cycle. So if you take LCR samples annually, then you'd submit it then. If you do sampling every 3 years, you'd submit it then. So it's not a one-time deal. You have to keep maintaining it. So that's something to think about. What does EPA call a lead service line? This is a big topic of discussion. There are, in fact, some gray areas that are being discussed, and all of that should be resolved within the next few months here as EPA takes a second look at some of these nuances. But EPA calls a lead service line a portion of pipe that is made of lead, which connects the water main to the building inlet and may be owned by the water system, owned by the property owner, or both. So a lead pipe on the public or private side. So that's the first kind. The next important definition is something they call galvanized requiring replacement. And that is a galvanized pipe that is or ever was downstream of a lead service line or a service line of unknown materials. So complicated definitions, and I'm putting this up, I'm putting this hieroglyphics up here first because I think this lends itself to, it makes the point of very important to figure out how am I going to start categorizing information so that I can get to these two types of pipes. And we're going to talk about how we think you should do that. So we looked at that definition. What do you have to do? So your inventory needs to contain these 4 things: lead pipes as they were defined in that last slide, galvanized pipes previously connected to lead. That could be another pipe, like maybe the customer side of the service line is lead and your side is galvanized. That would be a galvanized pipe previously connected to lead or currently connected to lead. Possibly a gooseneck. This is one of those gray areas. If you have a galvanized line that's connected only to a lead gooseneck on your side, is that a pipe that would require replacement if you got into some type of compliance issue? EPA is still figuring out some of those nuances, and we'll talk about why that in some ways doesn't really matter in terms of the work that you have to do, in my opinion. You have to categorize non-lead pipes. You can either just call them non-lead or you can detail the actual materials, and then you're supposed to detail unknowns as well. So this is what EPA wants you to look at. And my recommendation is think about what you have to report. These are the 4 categories, but then how do you get there efficiently? And in terms of being efficient, because you're going to have to pour through records, we'll talk about this, you're going to have to detail these things. Here's what we think you should include. Obviously, all 4 to the left. All galvanized, that makes sense. If you need to figure out if something was previously connected to lead or is currently connected to lead, detail all of the galvanized pipes that you either have on record or as you encounter them. Goosenecks and pigtails. EPA is not calling just the gooseneck, and I think everybody knows what that is, but just in case, it's the hunk of pipe that connects the main to the lateral. So they're not requiring that you call that a lead pipe, but if you disturb it, you've got to notify customers. If you find it, you're supposed to replace it. And so regardless of if they call it a lead pipe, it's going to be part of your life. And so we highly recommend that you detail those as you find them in the course of your work. Copper and lead solder. Here's another one. Lead solder is not included in the definition of a lead pipe, but you use it for your tier list. So if you're already going out and you're getting this information, same thing, just efficiency. we recommend that you detail that information and do it in a sustainable way, because y'all are pretty busy folks. And then I would say same thing, go ahead as part of your asset management work, detail your actual lateral material so that you can get more out of this exercise and it doesn't feel futile. A lot of you, have told me, and I've been in some great conversations with some of you over the past few weeks, you've never seen a lead pipe. And so this feels like a whole lot of work and it feels a little futile. So to get more out of it, future-proof yourself, broaden the definition so you can use this data for other things like asset management. That's what we recommend. Let's get down to how. So we talked about how EPA defines what a lead pipe is, what you need to include in the inventory, what sources of truth can you rely on to answer these questions. These 4 bullets come right out of the regulation. You can use construction and plumbing codes, permits, existing records, or other documentation. All water system records, so GIS, if you did a meter replacement program and you have records that all the locations use copper pipes, you can use these things. All inspections of records in the distribution system with material or age, as-builts, engineering drawings, any resource information or identification method provided or required by the state. So your state may, in addition to these 3 bullets, they are likely to come out with some other things that you could use in your inventorying methods. But here's the take home. You can rely on records. You do not need to visually see every single line to classify it, but you do need to have information about the material type or the installation date as part of that information. So that is great news. I think, if EPA was saying, we're only going to count lines that you visually saw were lead, that would be a whole nother ball game. You actually know a lot more than you, well, not than you think than you do, but a lot of you have great records and they're maybe stashed away in different people's minds or data systems or places. And the goal here is to get yourself in a position to show EPA all that you know about your laterals as an organization. And I'm working with lots of water systems across the country. We're in 21 states now. And what I usually find in the course of a couple conversations is that you actually have a lot of information. You just need to get the right people and the right systems around the table so that you can get that thing harnessed, organized, and into a digital format so that you can manage it. So hopefully this allays any huge anxiety that you guys were having about this. We can use records, a lot. There's a lot on this slide. It comes from the Water Research Foundation. I'm only showing it to talk about something that I think is pretty crucial as a takeaway. The inventory under the lead and copper rule revisions is foundational to everything else. It's the basis for your tier sites. It requires you to take a number of actions, like have a lead service line replacement plan, like to notify customers when you're disturbing lines. And so we need to get this right and to do it early so that you're set up, again, over the next 3 to 10 years to act on it in a sustainable way. The Water Research Foundation talks about these sort of different types of pipes and then whether or not they're included in the inventory, whether or not if you get into trouble, they're counted as replacement, whether or not they require notification or education when the line is disturbed, and then whether or not they can be included in that tier 1 sample pool. So you can see like these categories are the actions I talked about, right? And you can see the inventory is not this isolated thing. It is an interactive piece of content that really needs to be carefully defined and managed. So not going through everything here because we've already talked about it, but it's foundational is the point. A final point I would make here, we talked about this issue of lead solder. For example, you have all these elements here that can be included in your tier 1 sample pool, but notice, lead solder is not on here anywhere. So you could be going out, if you did not include it, you could be going out in the system, getting your eyes on these lines and missing the opportunity to identify tier sites. And that matters because if you find and remove all your lead pipes, then you don't have tier sites anymore. So again, really thinking carefully about what do you want to include in your inventory that can make your life a little bit easier in the coming years. And that's our opinion. All right, so that's what you have to do. So as you're kind of thinking about what questions you have, I imagine there are quite a few about this topic. So if you have questions about what EPA includes as a lead service line or in the inventory, throw them into the chat, ask the questions, and then Mike and I can make sure that we address those at the end. So now compliance rant over, we're going to be talking about how you can get started. So at 120, at least, we break the concept of lead service line management or service line management kind of into 3 areas. Putting sunlight on your data, understanding what you know through the preliminary inventory and planning phase, that's where we are for lead and copper rule revisions. When we say what you can do today to prepare, it's a few areas of the rule, doing some of this work where you can figure out what you know, getting your plans aligned and getting ready to go. So we are in a preliminary planning phase of lead service line management here. Once you have that inventory done though, over time you want to verify the information and you want to augment it. You want to get those unknowns down, and we'll talk about how you can do that. And then eventually, if you do have a lot, someone's doing some editing on the slides. If you do have a lot of lead service lines, not required by law to replace them all, but you do have to have a plan for replacing them, and that is part of the law, the LSL replacement plan. So that would be kind of that other phase. So, in the next 3 years here, this is the preliminary inventory, that is the place to put your efforts. And then as you progress, you can kind of move on to planning in these other areas. That's what we recommend. So since we're here, phase 1, preliminary inventory, shedding sunlight on what you know. This graphic here to the right is from the Lead Service Line Replacement Collaborative. And if you haven't heard of them, they're an amazing educational resource for you. It's a group of state, federal utility folks that have sort of band together to find and get rid of lead service lines. And they have webinars and all kinds of content. So this is sort of an example of a decision tree that a utility could go through to try to figure out, do I have lead pipes and how should I categorize them? But largely, the preliminary inventory, I think, can sort of be broken down into 3 areas. First, you figure out, where do I have information stashed about lead service lines? What usually the first question we ask is, what kind of systems are you storing this information in? GIS, work order, billing systems, contractors you've worked with. Then you pull that information together. You track where it came from. Did someone see these pipes, or were these in records? And then you categorize the line and segment. Next, you should digitize that information so that you can update it easily over time and figure out how to do that. And you want to then update, or identify rather, opportunities to continue to refine the inventory with your team during the course of normal operations. Since we talked about the importance of figuring out how you want to track the data itself in that last slide, here's just a recommendation from us here at 120. You want to get to one source of truth about your inventory. One of the things that's really interesting, I think, about the lead and copper rule revisions is, a lot of folks that usually handle water quality compliance, they may not be in the T&D area of the business. They might not have a lot of information, or be used to thinking about GIS, or be used to thinking about your transmission and distribution system. But this rule is going to start bringing those 2 sides of the house together. So you wanna harness that information and get to one source of truth. You can use databases and platforms like ours. Lowell's going to be talking about that at the end. We have a tracking system that can help store this information for you. You can also use GIS systems. Excel, I think, would be a short-term thing. You don't want to continue to rely on Excel, because those versions get bounced around and it just becomes unsustainable really quickly. Avoid paper if you can. There are some states that have even asked utilities to turn in their inventories via paper, but you can't act on that information. So again, it's just not an efficient way to do things. And then again, note that source of information. I would, at 120 at least, we break it down into two areas. Did you see the pipe, or did this come from a record? And then when we work with clients, we store examples of those records so that if the government wants information about it, that we can come to the table and say, hey, this is how we came to this information. Here's our record. You're done. Last little data tip here. So we've talked a lot about, how to define a lead service line. When it comes to categorizing this asset, it can get kind of complicated because it's not like it's one pipe, right? And so this is the way that we 120 break up the service line components. And this is a way I would recommend that you all do it as well. You want an area to capture that fitting if you do see it when you're out in the field. So the fitting would be the gooseneck or the pigtail. And you want to, especially if you own half and the customer owns the other half, you want to break up the segments to public and private segments. So that if those two things are different, if you're doing a project and you say, oh, I just discovered, we have a copper line on our side, but it looks like they have a galvanized line, that you can track those things. So this is regardless of where the meter or curb stop is, breaking things up by these kind of three segments, I think is going to be very helpful in setting you up for success. The next thing that you'll want to do after you've got your data all sunlighted is pick your lead service line inventory strategy. So I've got the information. Well, long term, how should I act on this inventory, or how can I make it better? If after the exercise of looking at your information, you actually don't have a lot of information gaps, you have good data about your service line, then it's really just about whittling down your unknowns over time. What are projects that you're going to be doing over the next few years that allow you to get your eyes on service line assets, and how can you just update your inventory that way? Maybe you're engaging customers. I'm going to give you an example of how we've been doing that with some clients, to have customers actually participate in your inventory and give you some data about what they know and what they see in their basements, for example. For some of you, modeling may be a good option too. So we have developed, and just a couple others that I can think of have developed algorithms that will take what say the homes that have lead pipes, and it will learn about those homes. How old are they? How much are they worth, etc. Some variables that we've encountered in our research. And then it will develop predictions for any home that does not have a known service line material type. So, my house is very old and it's right downtown. And so I bet that the algorithm would say I have a 95% likelihood of having a lead service line. So it is at the location level, and you can use that then to figure out how you want to efficiently, again, whittle down those unknowns. It does require access to tax parcel data, but we found most cities have it, and it might be just another department phone call or email away and you can get it. So two strategies that I would recommend, and both of these 120 works in, as Lowell will talk about. After that, then you also want to think about kind of your validation strategy. So validation is something that's not required by the rule, but you do have to ID what your plan or strategy would be if as you're developing your lead service line replacement plan. So validating, you've done some modeling, or you've poured through your records and you say that this is a lead service line. If it comes down to it and you have to do some replacement, how would you go out and validate that information? That's what we're talking about here. And there's two ways to do that. You can see it with your own eyes, and there's a couple different ways of seeing it with your own eyes, or you can test for the material. In terms of opportunities to see it with your own eyes, projects, meter replacement programs, potholing digging up little holes in the across the line or in the yard. XRF devices, these are basically like a gun that you can point at the pipe and it will tell you what the composition is. Using people, we talked about customer campaigns. This image on the bottom left is from a postcard that we send out on behalf of our clients directly to homeowners, and it tells them what a service line is. It gives them a QR code. They scan the code. They take a picture of the line, and it comes into our platform and is part of their inventory. So there are ways to engage homeowners and have them be part of this process. Aside from seeing it, testing, that's another way. We're going to talk about first and fifth liter sampling as part of the lead and copper rule revisions in a future session, but you can use water sampling is the takeaway to find lead service lines. They also have these things called lead check swabs. You can buy them at Home Depot, but basically you crush these little ampules inside of this swab, and there's a reagent inside the swab, and when you rub it on a leaded surface, it'll turn red. So customers or utilities can use them, and they do. This isn't really about what's required, but all to say there are federal, state, and local sources of funding for lead service lines. And, Biden basically declared war on lead pipes a couple weeks back in his American Jobs Plan. And he wants to make grants, not loans, billions of dollars in grants for lead service line replacement. So this is all to say, getting your inventory done will get you in a position to access that funding that is coming. In terms of replacement, again, not required, but there are some provisions to know about. You've got to have that plan, and all these bullets, you're going to have these slides. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are the types of things that would be required in that plan. That is not where your efforts need to be spent right now. That is a down the road thing, but I just wanted you to know about it. The inventory is the focus for now. And then there are some other provisions. Like I mentioned, once you've got the inventory and you got your replacement plan, there are ways in which you are required to do some replacement or to take some action on your inventory. Notifying customers if the line is disturbed. They've got one, if the customer replaces their side, you've got to replace your side in 45 days. If you replace the line, you've got to send pitcher filter kits and you have to take a water sample afterwards. And so what I would say is focus on your inventory, and then relative to these items, think about your replacement plan, get prepped to think through what kinds of validation strategies you would use, for example. And then think about your supplies. Do you have access to water testing kits? Do you have access to pitcher filters? Those types of things, planning. And then here are my takeaway messages, and then I'll hand things over to Mike McGill to talk about the comms aspects of all of this. But everybody's got to do a lead service line inventory. If you are regulated by the lead and copper rule, you got to do one of these. That's the most important takeaway. Start as soon as possible. You need this time. It doesn't have to be highly complicated. We've come up with some standard ways to approach this stuff, but it is time consuming. And so thinking through who you're going to work with, how you're going to do it is going to be hugely important. And starting as soon as possible is a great idea. Embrace those unknowns. You don't have to know every single service line yet. It's okay. And the law has made it that way as well, because EPA knows the stuff's complicated. Future-proof yourself by thinking carefully about how you're going to define your inventory and what methods you're going to use to go at it. Set yourself up so that, again, in 5-10 years, you're not having to go back to add in lead solder or go back to add in lead goosenets. Just set up your system today and fill up that inventory over time. Look for funding. You have an inventory, you're going to be first in line for funding. That's important. And then just think about that lead service line replacement preparedness, like I talked about, kits and so forth. And so with that, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Mike McGill. Mike, you ready?
Yes, I'm all set.
All right.
Thank you, Erica. I appreciate it. So, going to start off with my basic concept for everything and everybody. And actually, I had a conversation with this with some top communicators over the weekend. You've got to become and stay the go-to source for public information about all this work. Nothing is more problematic for water utility now than if they stay silent, especially when it comes to the new lead and copper rule. AWWA made some news the last few days. They're out with a new poll, a nationwide poll that found 28% of people who responded to the poll who were water customers said they remembered communications from their utility at all. At all. So less than 30% of customers out there have heard from their water utilities. So when we look in the future on all this lead and copper rule work we've got to do, we've got to stay out front. You got to talk early and often. Erica talked about getting your inventories together. I want you to think about getting your comms together as well. And actually the inventory work, that's essential for your success. So you might as well start getting going with both right now. Go ahead, Erica. So these are text heavy. I apologize, but they're designed so you can go back and look, and I've got 10 minutes. So listen, the new lead and copper rule is a significant threat to public confidence in drinking water. I don't have to tell you this. You're water pros. You've seen regulations come down that don't make any sense, that are problematic. In this case, they greatly increase the chances for lead discoveries and exceedances. And it's a variety of PR nightmares. I alluded to them last week. We'll talk about them more in the coming weeks. You've got a reduced ability to provide important perspective. And it requires communications that honestly, as I just showed with that data point, that are outside your comfort levels. Okay, I understand how you've always done things certain ways when it comes to water communications. You got to move past that now. Hundreds of utilities across this country will face lead issues for the first time under the new rule. Many of you will for the first time, and mistakes will be made. I mean, we've dealt with several mistakes made when utilities have to deal with them for the first time. Flint still hangs over our industry. Everything mentioned about lead talks about Flint. Everybody, the press, the public, politicians know about Flint, and they'll go there the second you have a problem. Every exceedance draws out comparisons. Despite a lack of connection, the typical water exceedance has nothing to do with Flint. And I do make sure that I bring out that task force report every chance I get with skeptical reporters. But that Flint factor, you've got to factor it into every conversation. Over the last couple of years, I've held Belton Honeopath and Mitch Ellenberg with their lead exceedance. I'll just say this. If you ever want to talk to somebody about how to properly handle exceedance, it's Mitch. But during that work that has been successful, I had to deal with Sammy Fretwell, the top environmental reporter for the state newspaper in South Carolina. I had to talk to him for hours on end. The first part of the conversation was about Flint. The middle part of the conversation was about Flint. The end part of the conversation was about Flint. He wanted to make it his own Flint. And spinning out of the problems in Denmark down there, he had an opening, but we didn't let him have it. Mitch was great. I worked behind the scenes and we got it done. But that's what can happen to you if you're not prepared. We in water haven't helped ourselves. We haven't proactively talked about lead out of fear. For data is great. I've mentioned this before. It's in our CCRs and we wipe our brows. If it's above the action level, then we cross our fingers and hang on and just kind of, duck and weave and bob so we don't get hit. And as a result, we've got to get out front with proactive communications. And lead and copper or lead service line inventories are a great way to start to get you going because everybody's got to do this. Go ahead, Erica. Sorry. All right. Key comms rule for the revisions. Explain the rule and the challenges before they affect you. Don't run away with it. This is what we talked about. That's what we did with Mitch. We didn't run away from the rule. We told people how it worked and how we were going to work with the rule. Timing is everything, especially with inventories. If you talk about your inventory work before an exceedance or a discovery is found, you look transparent and trustworthy. If you talk about it afterwards, the exact same things, the exact same words, and you'll look guilty. The positives of the rule, you got the tools that help get the lead out. And you don't have to have needless changes to water chemistry. I've talked about this before. That's important. When action is needed, you're going to take it. And the goals are protect people in the short term and find the right long-term solutions. We're doing this with Rowan County in North Carolina right now. The challenges, there are many under the rule, the inventory work, the schools and daycares, the trigger level, and the communications work. We've talked about that. The way you put a pin in that is talk about your hard work to meet the rule every step of the way. Show your work and your customers will trust your work. And you can provide important perspective and set up expectations for future issues. With lead service line inventories, you've got to deal with knowns and unknowns. All right, you've got to set the expectations first, or else the public is going to get scared when you find something. Go ahead. The new directive to conduct the inventories will draw attention, flat out. You're going to have to conduct this work and the public's going to have to know about it. And here are the questions they're going to have. Why haven't you done this before? You don't know what lines you have? What do you mean I have an unknown line? And of course, the extreme, which you'll see, you could be poisoning us and you don't know. The process will take time to complete unless you don't have lead service lines. And the public and the press aren't going to like to wait. You must prepare for impatience by going first. The inventories will be publicly available. So it's hurtful because the problems are there for all to see and there's no context. It's helpful if you provide the context. So the problems are out there. You've done the work. You can take an opportunity to tell people, hey, listen, we've got a problem in these older homes in this part of our service area. It doesn't affect all of you. That's where the context comes in. Problematic notification to customers, the location of lead service line. You've got one. You've got to tell each customer about it or the unknown. The fear of the unknown, the fear of explaining the unknown. It's not easy. What do you mean you don't know? Well, this is going to be a bit difficult. I'm already working with one utility in Florida on this. And it's problematic notification to the customer is the replacement work. Project work that you do that could disturb lead service lines, you're going to have communications ready about what you do if you find a lead service line during your work. The utility in Florida, they're doing meter work. They've actually jumped the gun a little bit on their inventory work. They're having the people replacing meters do lead service line inventory work right now already. And they didn't have comms ready. So we've been brought in. Oh, go ahead, Erica. Sorry, I just clicked. So the approach, get your lead and lead service line inventory comms together now. That's what we do. Prepare for impacts by talking about your current work. You're building trust and confidence in you before you have to deal with the new rule. With inventories, start communicating before you get started. This is the problem we've got in Florida. They've already conducted the work. Customers are already asking questions. They didn't have a comms plan. Well, you got to have a comms plan first. Plan transparency. I've talked about this before. It pays dividends now and in the future. You gain control over the inventory story as you build trust with the public. If I hear from you first, I trust you first. If I hear from you last, I trust you last. You talk to the press about the inventory work you're going to do and what it means and how you're doing it and why you're doing it. You're going to own the field, okay? Putting together your plan for inventories, be sure to include comms. If you got informed at the end, the rule is informed at the beginning. Develop the messaging with your team. You want to be on the same page internally as well. That's where Mitch was great on his exceedance. Communications plans, inform the press and the public throughout the work. You want to talk early, often, throughout. You gain trust. And I've talked about this before. If you have information gaps, that's where social media people can come in and cause chaos. You know, those always angry that are just going to yell and scream at you. They find gaps and they open them up. And then on social media, those two words that a lot of you hate, you got to drive the conversation. And you stop misinformation if you're on there. So if you're explaining your lead service line inventory work and you're out there pushing out the information, it's harder for people to take over social media on you. And then the project comms, I talked about this last slide, anticipate disturbing LSLs and unknowns. You got to have leave behind materials together, web content needed at the very basic. You're also going to have some press comments in your back pocket because customers might call the press if they don't like your response, and the press is going to run the Flint. You got to be ready. The messages, you're the experts. This is what you do. You know, in the instant information age I talk about, the public needs to hear from you. Those always angry, they're going to be angry. But most want reassurance from the people in the know that you're on top of this. Perspective is essential. This is not Flint. As I mentioned, they'll go straight to Flint. In Rowan County, North Carolina, I met with all the Board of Commissioners one-on-one to talk to them about handling the Flint question. Because if you make a mistake on the Flint question, that's your story. But you've got to explain the difference. There's a little typo there. You got to explain the distance from your informed expert role. Show your work. just like anything else. If you show your work, the public's going to trust you. You're taking action to protect public health, as you always have. You talk about your current programs, which show that it's not the water. Okay, it's not the water. That's a key perspective point for everybody. And then you shift to your compliance with the new rule. This is just the next stage of your current work on lead. And the inventory messages, this is part of your plan to get the lead out. Everybody wants the lead out. All right, you're dedicated to ending these concerns for future generations, and your hardworking staff's going to do it. You're going to eliminate the problem at the source, and you've got a commitment to community. And again, that's a message that supports. It's not the water. Set the expectations. It's not going to be easy, and it will take time, but you can do that if you're communicating. And on social media, you talk about the fact you don't want them to run away from it. Don't tell them they can't look at it, because they'll look at it. Just say that if you have questions about what you see, ask us and we'll give you the right answers. And I'll close. This is a massive slide. I apologize. It's all in writing for you to refer to. We are non-exclusive communications partners with 120Water. So we provide assistance in 3 ways. We've got the wide range of affordable public health comm services separately or through 120Water. Immediate public notification. We're providing a comms template library. If you've got an exceedance, what do you got to crank out in those first 24 hours to make sure that you don't get an NOV? So you can get that through their platform in the coming days, or you can get it from us if you're not working with 120Water. Instant compliance assistance. You plug in that information, you push the button, you meet state and federal regulations. And it's right there under 120's platform as well. Where it's more of a referral service, we provide information and comms, crisis communication support, 24/7, 365, succeed beyond the first 24 hours. This is what we did with Belton Homeopath. We're always on call to help you. Media requests, dealing with strategies, customer anger, that's where we're there. And then the long term, how do you deal with the whole exceedance over the next 12, 18 months, whatever the case may be? We help you succeed for months and years with communications, crossing all topics, customer media and crisis communications, print materials, mass media outreach, social media content, influencer outreach, everything. That's what we do at 120Water and Water PIO. I guess I got there. That's what we do. So with that, I'll give it back to Erica.
Fabulous. All right. Well, now we're transitioning over to the end of the session here. Lowell has a few items that he wants to share with you from the company, and then hopefully we can get into some questions. So Lowell, I can keep advancing slides if you want to speak up.
Yep. Yeah, great. We've seen some great questions come in, so thank you for that. On Monday, May 3rd, we're going to be diving into lead and facilities, which is another provision inside the lead and copper rule. So it's a whole new world, so please tune in there. And then on Monday, May 17th at 9 a.m., I know these are Monday mornings, but a good way to kick off your week with some great information on tier site monitoring and what you guys can do. What does the rule provision as far as small system flexibility? We do have some resources that we're working with your association with Jill and Charlie. So we'll hopefully be getting those out here in the coming weeks, guidelines, and we're working on a readiness assessment that we hope to be deploying here soon as well, because I know this is just a lot of information. And we always have our webinars on our website, and we'll be pushing these through to the association to get out for you as well. So again, I know we talked a lot about how there's a lot of things that have to happen, and we just want you to know that we've developed this partnership with SCRWA to help you, and we're hoping to have a lot of conversations with you over the coming months and weeks. And today, for the most part, we're helping utilities execute their lead and copper compliance by outsourcing that for them. Our solution powers that from the time that we send the kits out on your behalf to the resident. We've got a services team that helps the resident make sure that they get that sample taken. There are prepaid shipping labels inside the kits that we actually send to them. So they go directly back to the lab, either your lab or a partner lab that we have. Those results get loaded right back into our system. And then, like Mike said, we have communications capabilities within the system that go out automatically. So again, like Erica said, we're doing this in over 20 states across the country, helping utilities manage that component. But like what we talked about today, there's this whole concept of lead service line management, data management, public comms, school and daycare sampling. All of that is something that we have built a solution for you. And we've partnered with Charlie and Jill to be able to bring these things to you with exclusive pricing. We're going to offer, free consultations. Again, I think one thing that you've probably noticed is that Erica has a very, very, very tight grip on all of this legislation. Her and her consulting team meet with and assess and pull all, like they'll take a look at your data. What data do you have? What data don't you have? What do you need? So we are here to bring a holistic solution to you, understanding that not everybody is at the same position in their lead and copper journey. So we want to help build a timeline and a solution and a strategy for you that you can implement that is unique to your situation, your people, your tools. So what we've done is we've amassed a team, and over the next, if you want to advance the slide, Erica, like I said, any SCRWA member, we'll sit down with you. We can talk with you and help you understand where you're at in that process. Show you all the different ways that we can help. And, as the compliance deadline looms, kind of put together a strategy, on what you can be doing today. Like I said, it doesn't have to mean spending money. It's about helping you all understand what you can be doing today. And we have a team. Some of you might have already heard from Claire or Sam or Matt from the 120Water team. They're going to be reaching out to you. And if you don't know if you need help today, and you want to, reach out to your technical assistance providers, however it is that you want to get in touch with us so that we can help you out and have the conversation and just spend 30 minutes to help orient you and your teams to all this process, please let us know. If you want to advance the slide, here's our team. They're real people. They're here. They talk. They spend every day of every week trying to help utilities, and they are poised and ready to set up consultations with you all. If and as you're ready. And just wanted to let you know that, again, we are here to help, and we understand just how big of a process this is. They're asking, the EPA is asking us all to do things that are outside of our comfort zone, things that we haven't done. So all to say that we're here. I think the partnership that we're building with Charlie and Jill and team is gonna be great. And we've already had some initial success. We hope to do a lot more. So I'm not going to talk anymore because I want to get to some of these questions. They've been fantastic. So let's see.
Well, before we jump in really quick, I guess Charlie, opening it up, is there anything that you wanted to share before we hop into questions?
Yeah.
Oh, I think this is what we're looking to do. So again, if you don't know where you are with your utility, there's a free opportunity to talk with the experts, and they can kind of guide you along the way. And it is an a la carte program. So if there's some parts that you feel very comfortable about, then you should proceed with those. If there's those that you don't, here's a resource. May not be the only resource, but it's a resource at discounted prices. And I think they could really help you. Like I said, I think they're doing business in 21 states now, something like that. So not many people have more information than they do. So I appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing these questions, and thank you all for your questions as well.
Great.
Okay.
All right, well, you want to take us to Question Town?
Yeah.
All right.
So Vincent asked, what does disturb mean? And if I replace the pipe, do I have to perform public education?
Yeah, disturbed, and actually that's something we could probably send a follow-up note to be more thorough, but disturbed means you're doing work in the area and the pipe has the likelihood of being disturbed. So think about main replacements, for example, in the area, or possibly things above surface that could disturb the line. So there may be some future interpretation of that. Like, for example, is doing street work a different department? You guys, you're not even responsible for that. Does that count as being disturbed? So right now I would consider it to be the things that you are doing that could disturb the line. But there will likely be some more interpretation there. And then on whether or not, what was the second piece? Oh, public education. You have to notify them in terms of the standard education that you're used to providing. I would assume here you're going to be getting some more materials from your state regulators on that. Mike, you had anything to
Well,
that?
yeah, and there's also the practical piece of, like I alluded to during my speech, I've got a client down in Florida that has kind of put pedal to the metal and has decided to conduct inventory work as they're doing a meter replacement. They're considering that disturbing the line. So what they've done, they've really gone out and they've drawn attention to themselves before they're ready. So we're developing communications now, because in a practical sense, if you discover something, you better notify about it. Otherwise, you're seen as hiding something, which is death to a utility. So we're coming up with communications for them right now to deal with the practical matter of, what do you find? What do you communicate if you find something, or you're doing work that the unknown factor, before we get word from our regulators on what is going to be required to be said, just as a practical kind of piece of information that gets in the middle of that gap that's created. Ideally, you're going to get your inventory plan together and your comms plan together, and they're going to be working. First, you're going to have everything all set before you move forward. But unfortunately, with this utility in Florida, someone just kind of lone wolfed it and started doing inventory work as they're doing a meter replacement, and it's created some problems. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. If you do not have physical records with the information needed, it sounds like we'll have to do inspection on all services.
Not necessarily. What they're saying is, I mean, records is broad. You saw that slide. I had 3 bullets full of different records types. So they're not saying if you don't have GIS records, you can't do an inventory. I would guess that the person that asked this question has some records that we could use. They've done a main or meter replacement project in the last 50 years. They've got a customer billing system or a work order system that has information in it. So I highly doubt that you're even in this position. If you truly have 0 records, then really what you'd have to put is unknown for every single line. It's not that you'd have to go validate it in person at that point, but I would really highly caution against just taking that strategy, like not going through the work of seeing what kind of records you have. Because if you say that you don't know anything, that means you got to tell your whole customer base that you don't know if they have a lead pipe, and that's going to cause some issues for you. It also, codifying something as unknown has some compliance implications, as I mentioned, when it comes to replacement and so forth. So no, you don't have to do that, but I bet you know more than you think you do.
Great. And thank you, Donald. Great question.
Yeah.
Vincent asked again, if we know how much these XRF devices are. I probably need to dig in, unless you have any idea. Maybe we could send a note to Jill or Charlie about, here are the people that have them. But Erica, any idea on that?
I see they can be as cheap as a couple $100 to getting in the thousands. I guess I would more think about the strategy of using them. Like, sadly, you can't like, it's not like a superhero gun. You can't shoot it over ground and it will tell you what's under there. I mean, gosh, I would love to have a tool like that. My clients would be very happy if I was like, you know what, I'm going to hop in my truck. I got this gun. It's magic. I'm going to tell you what all your pipes are. This can only be used if you can get real close to the surface. So for a service line, that means you got to at least excavate, which is very costly. And for most of you, I just don't recommend that as an inventorying strategy to start. It's too expensive. start with the records review first and get that digitization down on lock. That should be the focus. But yeah, if you're ready to go out and do validation or verification, XRFs are a great tool.
Great. Okay, Wes Carter asked, the customer side meter to the structure will be unknown for most in our system.
Yeah.
What will the utility have to do on the customer side? Inventory, and I think probably replacement. I said replenishment, but
I like replenishment better. It's more positive. Let's just make the switch. So yeah, you're not alone. I have rarely met a system who has private side information. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Don't get stressed because everybody, big, small systems, that's the equalizer. Hardly anybody has this information out there. In terms of what you're required to do, I mean, first it's to say you don't know that. You know what I mean? The first thing is we're putting sunlight on your data. So if you really don't know what that is on that side, you would start just to say it's unknown. But then when it comes to submission, there may be some really efficient things you can do. Your regulator may say, for instance, if your side, you know what it is, you can go ahead, if it wasn't lead on your side, you can go ahead and say that side's likely not lead, for example. So just say what you know and what you don't know. They're not requiring you to go to that customer and get into their basement and do it. Now, we highly recommend over time, though, that you do start to engage and you start to fill in those unknowns. That's just for your own efficiency. That's just for your own risk mitigation. Mike, you have anything you'd add on that?
No, I think that covers it pretty well. I mean, the idea is if we all want to get the lead out, we obviously want to help our customers get the lead out. But there are certain requirements on our side versus the customer side. But I will say, you touched upon the unknown issue. This is one case where, the fact the customer doesn't know, that raises the level of understanding in us not knowing everything about our systems either. So, there is a little bit of an all in it together kind of message there that helps us out, push back against that idea of you don't know what's in your system. But the idea is we all want to get the lead out. We all want to help our customers. But there are some lines on who is responsible for what. Great.
Charlie, do you want us to go through the rest of the questions? I know we're just about at 10 o'clock here, or do you want us to address these and send them out to the
Yeah, let's quickly try to answer these. These are some great questions and questions that we're getting. So let's quickly go through them, please.
Right. So Michael Britt says, and Eric, I know you have this one a lot. What if we don't have any lead services? What's EPA going to say?
You got to prove it. But that's it. I mean, you still got to submit an inventory. And like I said, that may not be that big of a deal for some of you, but you need to provide evidence and you need to talk about how you got at that. So you need to provide, for instance, some probably examples of the records that you used to get there.
And I'll just say this, it's a great moment for proactive communications to your customers. If you can prove it, you tell them that you've got the problem covered as it makes news all across the country, like we think it will. You say you're ahead of the game and you don't have those lines.
Yep. And, I know like Charlie and his system, I think in Chesterfield, or sorry, I forget exactly what the name of the town is, but I know they did an AMI meter replacement in 2009. So they have all those records about what they saw when they were actually putting those cutoff valves and things. And they have that digitally archived. So again, think about how you're going to say, I can prove that I don't have lead.
Yep. There's lots of information. Again, you have more, more than you think you do.
Yep. William Jenkins, through the years, if you have replaced mains and service lines on all portions of the system that are over 75 years and no lead service lines were found, can you simply just state that there are no lines in the system?
That wouldn't do it. Like there, I mean, you'd have to get the records together. But yeah, I mean, that's an example. I think that system is probably in a pretty good position to gather their evidence and make the case that they don't have them. Yeah, but it's not going to be like a written paragraph, right? It's still, you need to provide the full evidence set.
Great. Yeah, and like you said, if you've been doing the work, hopefully there's pieces and places that you can start pulling all that, like she said, kind of get all that together, clean it, and then it kind of verify where you're at in that process. Donald Covington had another question. If we ask the homeowners and the account owners what type of plumbing they have from the meter to their home, will that meet the requirement if they give us a response?
That'd be, well, that's an interesting, yes. It depends on how you do it, right? Like, for example, when we do it, we have the customer use a lead check swab or take a picture. So you have actual evidence that of its material type. I don't know if you just sent a survey and they were like, no, I don't have one. I'm not sure if that would work, but there is a way to get information from your customers that would pass the sniff test.
Great. And then Derek asked, can we talk more about the gooseneck pigtail connections off the mains? Are we required to verify these as well? Potholing service lines, while difficult, will be a piece of cake compared to digging down to the mains to verify goosenecks or pigtails.
This is a big topic. It's something, you know, people are talking about this piece a lot. Here's what EPA has said. They've said, really for the reason that Derek brought up, like, it's too tough for you all to go in and expose just a gooseneck. They realize that, and so that's why they've not included it currently in the definition of a lead service line. So right now, no, you are not required, if you only have a gooseneck, to go and find just the goosenecks and to include them in the inventory. They are relevant though to your work. For example, you know, if you find one, you're supposed to replace it automatically. That's what's in the rule. There's also the disturbances piece, right? If you disturb and you've got a gooseneck in the area, you're supposed to notify. And then lastly, there is some uncertainty about if it's a gooseneck connected to a galvanized, does that meet EPA's definition? They don't even know. They're not, we asked the question and they said, we're not sure if it's a lead pipe. So that, again, for me, what that means is that's all to me, it's a bunch of noise. Like, set up, yes, it's important in the long run, especially in the next 4 years, but right now, go ahead and set up a process for collecting that information as you find it, work on your inventory, and then whenever the feds figure out what they're doing, you'll be ready to go. You've made a plan. And I should say, I know we're a little over, you know, we've not talked about the public health piece here. And I think that's probably, you know, one of the good notes that we can end on here. You all are public health professionals. Right. You provide clean water to the American public. You're essential. That's what COVID has shown us. You're essential workers. You provide essential services. Of course, you don't want to send people lead. You work hard to keep your drinking water clean and to support public health. This is a piece of that. Right. We're looking for balance. This is hard work, but it's also, the outcome is, you know, working for a reality in which no child has to drink lead in their drinking water. And of course, we're all behind that. We just need to figure out how to do it in a way that uses your resources efficiently.
Well said. Well said. And again, great questions. I'm sure there are more. However, you know, please reach out to us. You know, we know we can't address them all here, but we want to. We want to help you. We know there's a lot out there. So, you know, utilize the partnership that we've built. We will apply everything we have in our power to help you out. And appreciate the time and the dedication to education and learning about this sort of stuff. Just a testament to what incredible people we know you all are. So thank you.
Erica and Lowell and Mike, you did an awesome job again. Just like Lowell said earlier, make sure that you put on your calendar May 3rd, 9 a.m. and May 17th, 9 a.m. for the final tool installments. Charlie, you got anything else before I close it out?
No, appreciate everybody's attendance. We love your feedback. If this was helpful, let us know. If it wasn't, what we can do to improve. These sessions are for you. Take a lot of work. Appreciate Lowell, Erica, Mike, and appreciate everybody attending. Thank you so much.
And I know we're running late, but Lowell, did you see one more question pop up?
I did. Ben Rushton asked if everything in the system was installed before 1986, is that proof enough?
It'd be based on when your lead ban effective date took hold. So it'd be somewhere between 1986 and 1988. And yeah, I mean, if you have installation record dates of every service connection and they were all installed after your state's lead pipe ban, that would work.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Tony and
Thank y'all.
Charlie.
Thank y'all.
Have a good day, everybody.